Hi, and welcome back to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I keep re-recording because a dog keeps barking. And so if you've followed along at all, you know my neighbor's dog pretty constantly barks. And so hopefully I won't have to re-film, but if you hear it, hopefully it's not too distracting. Anyway, because I'm outside, and I'm outside because it's stunningly beautiful out here. The sun is out, even so much so that I'm actually hiding in a shady little corner inside my backyard in order to be able to record, because otherwise I would not even be able to see the camera. So this is Bible 365. We are reading through the Bible in 365 days. I'm hosting it. I am just somebody who loves to read the Bible. I love Jesus. I love following the Lord. And my hope is for inspiring people to read their Bibles, to be in your Bible every single day and read through the entire thing, even those parts that feel like we just did the book of Psalms and we did something like, I don't know, 90 Psalms. So we did a huge chunk of Psalms. And I know for some people it got really challenging. And I'm going to admit it got challenging for myself. I was kind of waiting to get into the next thing. But you still want to read through it. So even in those tough parts, you want to dig in, see what God has to say before you move on to the next section. So saying that, we are today in day 142. It is May 21st. Our readings today are 1 Kings 3:16 through 28, 5 and 6, and then 2 Chronicles 2 through 3:14. So it feels like a bigger reading. It is. There's a lot of information in here, but a lot of it is just about Solomon building his temple. So in order to remember who Solomon is, just a very quick, brief overview of where we've been. I'm going to go back to the beginning. So in the book of Genesis, Abraham was a descendant of Noah. So Noah was the guy from the ark, which I feel like if you've never read anything in the Bible before, you would know that story. So Noah is the guy on the ark. He had children, his children had children, and Abraham was one of those children. God asked Abraham to move to essentially the land of Israel, wound up promising him the land of Israel for his descendants. One of his descendants, well, his first son was Ishmael, who was not of the promise. Isaac was of the promise. Isaac had two sons. One of those sons was Jacob, who was of the promise. Jacob had 12 sons. Those 12 sons were of the promise. Those 12 sons had many, many, many sons. In having those sons, they started to become oppressed by the land of Egypt, by pharaohs and kings. And though they were slaves in the land of Egypt for several hundred years. And then Moses came along, who was one of the sons of Israel, was raised in the house of Pharaoh, and wound up getting all of those men out, or all of those people, all of the Israelites out of Egypt, saving them through God. God wanted to save his people because he heard the outcry, picked those people up as the nation of Israel, picked them up and brought them over into the land of Israel. There was some stuff going on, so it actually took them a little over 40 years to get there. Then Joshua wound up bringing them into the land of Israel, which was then Canaan, now Israel, and it was also a little bit of Syria and Jordan. And he brought them into that land. They overtook that land. They had some issues where people still lived in there, and when they weren't following the Lord, they were taking over, and then they started following the Lord. The Lord came to their rescue and saved them, and then this cycle happened over and over again until they got a king. They begged for a king, and they got King Saul. After they got King Saul, he was not a good king. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. He turned away from the Lord, and then the Lord appointed King David, and then King David reigned for 60 years. King David had a son. He had many, many, many sons, but he had one son named Solomon. Solomon was from Bathsheba, which we heard that story. We heard and read that story. If you haven't gotten any of this information, I would love if you went back. So look up my information and go back and start at the beginning, because it's a lot. But then by the time we get to King Solomon, he's now a young man. David has died. His father has died, and Solomon has taken over the kingdom. David actually gave Solomon the kingdom because that's what God told him to do. So Solomon is now running the kingdom. He has been running the kingdom for a few years. David wanted to build a temple for the Lord, and the Lord told him he was not to do that because of all the things that he did. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned a couple of times, he was the God more of war, and Solomon is more a God of peace. So because of all that David did for the Lord, Solomon is now running more of a peaceful nation. And in that peaceful nation, he's the one that's going to be building God's temple. So David got all the supplies ready, maybe not quite all, but a huge amount of supplies ready to prepare Solomon to be able to build this temple. Now Solomon is in charge. David has died, and Solomon is going to build that temple. So hopefully you're with me so far. That's all of our background. Just making sure my mic is working. Okay, so that's all of my background. So here we go. One of the things that Solomon asked for once he became king was to be wise, to have wisdom, to have knowledge in order to know right and wrong. And so this was the last thing when God met him in a dream. This is what he asked for before he offered sacrifices at the ark. And so we're going to follow along with that. This is 1 Kings 3:16 through 28. So we get this story of the two prostitutes. So these two prostitutes come to Solomon. This is the basic gist of it. These two prostitutes come to Solomon, and they each had a baby. One was pregnant. She had a baby. A few days later, the other one had a baby. Overnight, one of the babies died in their sleep. So one woman took the other woman's baby and pretended it was her own and said that the other baby had died. So they came to the temple to figure out who got this baby. So they went to Solomon. They told Solomon this entire story. And they said, who gets this baby? Now, the point of this is to show Solomon's wisdom, right? Because this is what's really important about Solomon. This is what makes Solomon distinctively different from other kings, right? Yes, he's got money. Yes, he's got power. Yes, he's got influence. Yes, he has servants working for him, right? All of those things that every other king has. But he has the wisdom of God. And this is something that I think that we should all be desiring, that this wisdom to really understand the difference between right and wrong could be a desire for all of us, not just to be like, powerful and great, but to be wise, right? Who cares if you're powerful and great if you have no wisdom, if you don't do it in a way that is wise and loving and caring? Okay. So the king says, in verse 23, the king said, this one says my son is alive and your son is dead, while that one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive. So then the king says, bring me a sword. So this is the solution he comes to. Bring me a sword. So they brought him a sword, and he says, 25. He says, then he gave an order, cut the child in two and give half to the one mom and half to the other mom. Do we really think that Solomon was going to cut the baby in two? No, I don't think under 1 second that Solomon was going to cut the baby in two. This was his wisdom trying to pull out the information from these women. The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of love, and she said, don't kill him, give him to this lady. So I don't want that baby dead. I'd rather that baby was somebody that's not his own mother than rather have that baby dead. And the other woman says, fine, just cut him in half. I think we could glean a lot from the hearts of the women and the heart of Solomon in doing all these things. But I think the general takeaway is to recognize how wise Solomon is. This is one of probably, and we get this story, but this is probably one of a million trials he had to reign over and make decisions on. And so they were all impressed with how wise he was, how he came to that conclusion. So it said, so this is, again, I'm going to say the point that we take away in verse 28. When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. So it's not just that he's smart, but he got wisdom from God to administer justice, to administer what was right and wrong, what is just. And then they're in awe of him, which generally means that they're going to follow him. When we are in awe of someone, we kind of want to either emulate them or we want to follow them and do what they do, right? Like in some ways, we like to surround ourselves or be around people that we are in awe of because we want, what do they have that I can have? Well, what they have by osmosis come onto me if I'm with them enough, right? So I think this is something that God did for him in order for him to show how wise he was, in order for the kingdom to recognize his wisdom and to continue to follow him, because he is the one that God anointed and put on the throne. So from here on, we're going to be talking about the temple. So that's really the cement for Solomon to continue to remain as king. Not that he wouldn't, but I think that because the people were in awe of him, that's why he remained king of the kingdom. All right, so now we're going to move on, and we're just going to talk about the temple. This is much like if you were with me or if you have read before in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. This is all of where, actually Exodus is where we put this together. In the book of Exodus is where we see the original temple being built. This was the moving temple. This was the temple that they put together, and then all the Levites picked up and moved every single time they moved in the woods for 40 years, in the desert, in the wilderness for 40 years. So this is the one that is going to stand. This is the one that is going to be there forever, that God wants there forever. So Hiram, king of Tyre, hears that Solomon has been anointed. Tyre is up in Lebanon. So I had to look at this because originally the 12 tribes of Israel, Asher was actually where Tyre is. And so it looks as if there was some subtle shifts when David became king. And so Tyre is no longer in the land of Israel. So Tyre is no longer under the control of King Solomon, or was not under the control of King David. Although in the beginning it was one of the 12 tribes that Joshua gave Asher that area. But it seemed to no longer, with David and Solomon, it seemed to just adjust a little bit. And so that whole area was Phoenicia. So there was this like little strip, and I'm drawing it on the picture as if there's this little strip at the edge of the water. That's Phoenicia. That's where they live. Phoenicians live. And so this is the king of the Phoenicians. This is not a follower of the Lord, the God of Israel. This is a follower. He follows a different God. However, because they have worked so well together, because David and this king Hiram have worked so well together, this king honors Solomon. He's actually pleased. He's happy that Solomon is the king, that David gave him the kingdom. And so now we're going to see that Solomon is going to wind up working with him. So, all right. So it says, I went back too far. Sorry. So he says, send me some cedar logs as you did for my father. And my father David, when you sent him cedar to build a palace to live in. I'm about to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God. And that's why I'm saying I recognize that there's a difference between the two of them, right? Solomon's like, I'm building a temple for my God, recognizing that this is not the God of Hiram and the people of Tyre. He's dedicated for him for burning fragrant incense, for setting out the consecrated bread, and for making burnt offerings every morning and evening. So the purpose of this temple is to worship the Lord, much like they did in the other temple. It's to bring him sacrifices every day. It's to bring him incense, the aroma of the Lord every day, right? It's to bring him the bread offerings, the wine offerings, all of those things. He's bringing all of it back into one building, everything. Because if you remember, as I was saying yesterday, it's separated. So the tabernacle itself is over in Jerusalem, and then the ark is over in, the temple itself is over in Gilead, and the ark is in Jerusalem. So he's now making a building. And I have to tell you, I don't know what they say, but as of yet, nothing. I think the ark winds up coming in Solomon's temple, but we're going to wind up finding that out because it's been a year since I read this. But it looks like nothing from the original tabernacle is going to be a part of this. So it's a completely new structure built on a foundation, built on solid ground. And so here we go. This is some of the interesting things that I noted. 70,000 men, 80,000 carriers, and 3,600 foremen over them. So here we go. Solomon is sending all these people to do the work, and they're going to work with the people of Hiram's kingdom, so the people of Tyre. They're going to work together. These people, he actually takes a census. These people aren't Israelites. These people are foreigners living in the land. So if you remember, when David conquered a lot of these territories, a lot of these people became servants in the land. They're considered foreigners. They're not Israelites, but they are servants of Israel. So he takes all of these people. He takes a census of all these people. This is the number he has. It's like 156,000, something like that. And he splits them up. Some of them work here, some of them work there, and then some of them are foremen that are over top of them that kind of tell them the things that they're supposed to do. So those are the people that he has doing all of the work for this temple. It's all foreigners. All right. And then so he has them building, and then he says he's really humble. I want to go in verse 5. In verse 5 it says the temple, and I'm in 2 Chronicles 2, 1 through 18. And in verse 5 it says, the temple I'm going to build will be great because our God is great, greater than all other gods. But who is able to build a temple for him, since the heavens, even the highest heavens, cannot contain him? So here we go again. We're seeing a little taste into Solomon's heart. So if you guys remember what David's heart looked like, and I feel like we know through all of those Psalms what David's heart looked like, Solomon is sort of continuing in this pattern. And we do see, I think it was last chapter yesterday, we see that he did follow his decrees. He loved the Lord, right? So that was one of the reasons that God honored him with this idea of wisdom. And so in this, he's realizing that like he's only a guy, and he realizes that his God is so much bigger than that. So like, I'm going to build him this house, but the heavens can't even contain him. He's so mighty. He's so great. He's so big. Like it's so far beyond our understanding. Because like even the heavens can't contain him. So if you look up, and this is one of those things they call the heavens, right? Because remember that we split by the heavens and the earth. The heaven, they can't even contain him. So this God is, if we genuinely believe he's the one who created earth with just words, there's a recognition that he's bigger and better than all that. And then Solomon's going to build this itty bitty house for him where he's going to worship for him. Now, it's not itty bitty in our eyes because it's, you know, something like 150 feet. It's a very big place to worship. And so, and then that's just the inside. That's not even counting all the courts and everything that's on the outside. I think it's almost the size of a football field when they show it completely built, including the courts and everything on the outside, the courtyards. It's almost the size of a football field, but not quite. So like it's big, but it's relatively speaking compared to this massive God, it's nothing. And Solomon's recognizing that. Like, yes, I'm going to make this thing for you. And we're going to be like, wow, this is something extraordinary. And you're going to be like, big deal. It's like the image just came to me as it's like when you go up into a plane, right? And then you're up above everything else and you look down and you see, and everything is like a little itty bitty, like, wow, that looks like an ant, and that's a tractor trailer, and it looks the size of an ant. Like that's the difference between God and us. And so Solomon, in his humility, because he's genuinely humble and he genuinely believes this because we hear his words, this is what he thinks. The heavens can't even contain him. So then what he wants to do is in verse 7, he says, send me therefore a man skilled to work in gold and silver, bronze and iron, and in purple, crimson, and blue yarn, and experienced in the art of engraving, to work in Judah and Jerusalem with my skilled workers, whom my father provided. So his father David provided these workers. So he's asking, I know this is great, but what I want to do is the best that we can possibly do. Send me one of your most skilled workers, because I know you have all these skilled workers that come from you. So send me one of those things. And so then Hiram says that he's going to send him someone. So he says, because the Lord loves his people, he's made you their king. And then Hiram adds, praise be to the Lord. So he loves Solomon enough that he's praising his God. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who made heaven and earth. You know what I just thought of? Just even saying that. So the king of Tyre did not worship the God of Israel, right? But he had enough respect for David that he recognized and praised the God of Israel. Think of that today. Like think of where you are and where you live. By the way, someone just told me that because I never say where I live. I never let my location be known. Some of you who watch know where I'm from, but someone who I haven't seen in a long time who moved out wester said that I have a really deep Philly accent, which I think is kind of funny. So anyway, that's not actually necessarily where I'm from, but it's just funny to hear that that I have an accent, because I feel like I do not at all have one. Anyway, so what would this, thinking of where you live now, this is how I got started in this, thinking I live in this area, thinking of where you live now, what do people think of the God that you serve? Do they think well of the God? Like, would they praise the God? Would they go, I don't necessarily believe in the God that you believe, but praise him because you follow him and you're obviously, name the thing that feels good, right? Like name the trait. You're obviously honest, you're patient, you're kind, you're charitable, right? Like any of these things. Are these things that people will say about you? Now, they may still hate a people group and they may hate a lot of things, but can they say about you, your God must be good. Praise be to your God because you are from that God. And again, hoping that it might be a conviction, right? Something to lay heavy on you. All right. So he says that, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who made heaven and earth. He has given King David a wise son. So he looks at Solomon and goes, something really good is happening there. That's a wise son. Praise be to your God. Then he goes in verse 13, I'm sending you Huramabi, a man of great skill. And this is interesting. So Huramabi is someone that lives in Phoenicia, right? So he's in Tyre. However, he is mixed. So he is part of the tribe of Dan and part of the tribe of Tyre. Well, not tribe, but he's also part Phoenician. So he's part Israeli and he's part Phoenician. And so he's sending this guy to them as someone who's going to be the skilled worker that works with them. And so it is somebody who shares genetics, shares a family line with this entire tribe. So he's going to send them. So moving down to building the temple, Solomon builds the temple, and it says in the 480th year of the Israelites came, in the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. So this is about 966 BC. So I've consistently said with David, it's about 1,000 years before Jesus, which is about 1,000 years before us. So this is a little bit less than that, right? This is under 1,000 years before we meet Jesus. And again, about 3,000 years before us. So this is when he starts to build the temple, although those numbers get a little skewed later, but because it says it takes him, this is the year where he starts and he finishes then. Anyway, so this is about, again, it's about a football field long. It is ornate. If you have an opportunity, I would love if you looked up a picture. I might try and put one in the comments so you can see. So it's ornate. It is, they have all these master builders come in. The stone that they build, so they don't even use like chisels or anything at the location. They don't want any of that stuff at the location. So they do everything at the quarry. They chisel it up. They make it as perfect as possible. Then they bring it to the temple area, right? To the mountain. So if something is wrong, they have to bring it back to to the quarry where they started. So this is not easy work. This is intense, not just labor, but it's intense art, right? So there's such a perfection here that they have to have in order to make everything meet and everything look as perfectly. And they make it artistic, right? So it says that they sculpt it and they engrave it and they do all of these things to it. So they do all that with the stone, and then on the inside they inlay all of it with gold. So again, it's obviously a rich house. They do all of it with gold, and then they have stones all on the inside, precious stones. So obviously, again, value. There's value everywhere. And then after that, they have this. So that's about, I think that's about 90 feet of that. That's like the temple. And then they go inside. They go a little bit past that, and then there's another room that I think is like 30 by 30, and this is the holy place. And in this place, they have these 2 giant cherubim. Their wingspans are 14 feet each, about, like, again, give or take 14 to 14 and a half feet each, these giant cherubim. And they're also inlaid or covered with gold. So everything is covered with gold. So it's this like glorious temple. And again, I'm going to mention, which I've mentioned the first time, when the tabernacle was done, it was a lot of that as well. They gave essentially all of their money all the money they took from the Egyptians, and they used it to build this temple, this tabernacle. And so there's this idea that it is a waste of money, right? And understandably so. Thinking about what our hearts go, oh my gosh, what could that money do? That money could build a school. That money could send 3,000 kids to college. That money could, right? Like, there are a lot of things that money can do. I don't want to take anything away from that. Now, many of us who go to like a Protestant style church, our churches are not that ornate, right? Like they're not, a Catholic church is more ornate. They have the stained glass windows, they have gold at the altars, things like that. Like, so there's a lot more, I want to say beauty there. Yeah, beauty is the word I'm going to use. There's a lot more beauty there, whereas Protestant churches are a little more plain. And so they've made just some decisions, right? After Jesus came and things changed, they made some decisions based on that. But looking back here and say the same heart would be in that, right? Like, we would say a lot of that, like, why would you waste that here? And so many of the people in the kingdom are starving. Like, let's be real. Not everyone was, certainly not rich, but not everyone was. I'm sure there were poor around there, and I'm sure that there were people that were not eating. And so what can we make of the fact that they're putting so much money into the temple? I think that's a question. I think in some ways it's kind of a hard question, because even as I sit and I think about it, I think to myself, Would God want that money to be used for him, or would God want that money to be used for somebody that's starving? And in some ways, I want to say it's both. The best should be going to God, the cleanest, the most pure, and the best, because He is God. And when you, please take care with what I say. When you give your best to God, someone just started weed whacking. When you give your best to God, God flourishes those things. So God doesn't use it, right? Like He's not like, oh, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to buy myself an airplane. That's not what God does. He doesn't use it. He blesses those who give abundantly, right? And so we're recognizing that God is worthy of all of this money and fine artwork and gold and silver and bronze and jewels and fine linen and all of these amazing things. God is worthy of those things. I feel like this is going to be louder than them. But in the same way, God will bless those who give. So we have made His house abundant, and then He will make your house abundant. What you do with what He gives you is really what you choose to do with what He gives you. All right, I got to take this to a different location. On the inside. Okay, had to change locations. So disappointed. Okay, but I've like 2 minutes left at the most. All right, so this was where, sorry, he was building the temple, and I was talking about the money that is put into it, and the money that what it matters, right? Why does it matter that that so much money was put into it? And again, this is just about how we feel and believe that God is worthy, right? And what we are willing to give to God in order to recognize His greatness. Like, is He someone who is worth all of your money, or is He someone who's just worth 10 cents of your money? Is He, and I'm not saying every building needs to be glorious and beautiful, but I want to make it noted and let it be understood that in Israel, God was trying to let everyone know who He was. And so in some way, right? Like, so this is who God is, right? And this is the building in which we worship God. And these are the people who are of God, right? And then so everyone around them knows and recognizes. And so there's something to be said about that. So recognizing that that's why it has the way it looks the way it looks. That's why it is so glorious, because He is. And so if He is, then that's the way that we want it to look here on earth. And like I said, I'm just about done here. So what I wanted to just note is it says in the 480th year. So we're down. Oh, I did that one already, but I want to note when we finish it. So these are all the rooms that he does, and he does kind of those extra rooms, and he overlays everything. And then it says down in 1 Kings 6 in verse 36, it says, and he built the inner courtyard of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams. So again, they're just discussing this is a different room, and they're discussing all the ornate things that are in there. And then it says the foundation of the temple of the Lord was laid in the 4th year in the month of Ziv. In the 11th year of the month of Bul, the 8th month, the temple was finished in all its detail according to its specifications. He had spent 7 years building that temple. So it took 7 years to build the temple, and we will see what happens after that. So this is, again, an ornate, beautiful, amazing thing. And this is where all the Israelites come, and this is where they come every year to celebrate and have Sabbaths there. So they do everything at this temple. This is really important to the people of Israel. That's where we're ending today. So if you guys have like this, I want you to hit the like button. I want you to share it and subscribe to the channel. I want you to ring the bell so you get notifications, and I put something through every day. So I will see you guys next time. And in the meantime, keep reading.